My name is Arjun. I still remember the scent of sandalwood and incense that filled our home in Varanasi. As a child, I would watch my father perform his morning puja with such reverence, his fingers moving deftly as he arranged flowers before the shrine of Lord Vishnu. My mother would sing bhajans in her melodious voice, the devotional songs rising and falling like the sacred Ganges that flowed through our city. Arjun, my father once told me, his eyes reflecting the light of the oil lamp, there is no higher calling than to devote one's life to seeking moksha. Those words planted a seed that would grow to define my existence. By the age of 19, while my peers pursued careers and relationships, I found myself drawn to a deeper quest. I would spend hours at the Kashi Vishwanath temple, mesmerized by the chanting of the priests and the ancient rituals that connected us to the divine. The day I received my sacred thread in the Upanayana ceremony, I felt a profound sense of purpose wash over me. My guru looked into my eyes and said, "You have been called to something greater, Arjun. The path of renunciation awaits you." When I entered the ashram at 23, I surrendered everything: my family name, my possessions, my attachments. The head priest draped the saffron robes over my shoulders and bestowed upon me a new identity: Swami Arjuna, devotee of Vishnu, seeker of ultimate truth. Years passed in disciplined devotion. I mastered the Vedas, memorized the Bhagavad Gita, and could recite entire passages from the Upanishads. My days began at 4 a.m. with meditation, followed by yoga, ritual bathing, teaching, and prayer. The rhythm of ashram life became my heartbeat. When the opportunity came to establish a new ashram in America, in Bloomington, Indiana, I embraced it as divine providence. Bring the wisdom of the East to the West, my guru instructed. They are hungry for truth but do not know where to find it. Our ashram in the quiet outskirts of Bloomington grew steadily. Americans came seeking alternatives to their materialistic lives, drawn to the peaceful countenance I had cultivated through years of spiritual discipline. I guided them through meditation, taught them about dharma and karma, and initiated them into devotional practices. "Swamiji," they would say, "you have brought us peace." But as I led others toward enlightenment, a quiet disquiet began to stir within me. It started as a whisper, easily dismissed during my busiest days. But in the stillness of my 3 a.m. meditations, the whisper grew louder: "Is this all there is?" Despite my devotion, despite the prostrations, the mantras, the fasting, the teaching, I began to feel an expanding emptiness. I had climbed the ladder of spiritual achievement only to find that it leaned against the wrong wall. One autumn evening in 2020, I stood by the small pond behind our ashram, watching the moon's reflection ripple across its surface. I had just finished leading a 3-hour worship service, my voice hoarse from chanting. My disciples had departed with serene expressions, while I remained hollow. "Lord Vishnu," I whispered to the night, "I have given you everything. Why do I feel so far from liberation? Why does moksha seem more distant now than when I began this journey?" The silence that answered me was deafening. That night, I began questioning everything. If moksha, liberation from the cycle of rebirth, was attainable through devotion and self-discipline, why did I feel trapped in a cycle of my own making? If the divine permeated all things, why did God feel so absent despite my ceaseless seeking? I kept these questions hidden, continuing to lead with the confidence expected of a Swami. But internally, I was crumbling. In June 2021, I organized a meditation retreat for our most dedicated disciples. For 7 days, we observed silence, meditated for hours, and performed elaborate rituals to Lord Vishnu. On the final evening, as I led the group in a devotional chant, the room began to spin. I remember the concern in my disciples' eyes as my voice faltered. I attempted to steady myself against the altar, knocking over an oil lamp. And then, darkness. What happened next defies simple explanation. I found myself floating above the Ganges, but not the sacred river of pilgrimage sites. This Ganges was polluted, choked with ashes and dying flowers. Along its banks were countless souls, their faces contorted in suffering, reaching toward the water that could not cleanse them. I recognized faces among them, ancestors, former teachers, even disciples who had passed away. All were caught in what I immediately understood to be samsara, the endless cycle of death and rebirth that we had sought to escape. "This is where your path leads," a voice said, though from where, I couldn't determine. "No amount of devotion will release you from this wheel." I tried to protest, to recite the sacred texts that promised liberation, but found myself mute. The vision shifted, and I was suddenly alone in an expanse of darkness so complete that it seemed to consume even the concept of light. And then, light appeared, not emanating from a source, but embodied in a person walking toward me. As the figure drew closer, I fell to my knees, overcome by a presence both terrifying and beautiful. "Arjuna," the figure said, and his voice contained both thunder and whisper, "you have sought me through many paths, but I am the way, the truth, and the life." I looked up into the face of Jesus Christ. Not the Western portrayal from religious artwork, but Jesus as a Middle Eastern Jewish man, his eyes holding depths of love and authority I had never encountered in all my spiritual quests. "Lord," I managed to say, "I have not been seeking you. I have been seeking moksha through Lord Vishnu." "You have been seeking freedom from death and suffering," he replied. "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, even though they die." In that moment, all my years of spiritual study and practice seemed like shadows compared to the reality before me. Jesus extended his hand, showing me the mark of crucifixion. "This is the price of true liberation," he said. "Not endless cycles of birth and death, but one perfect sacrifice." I don't know how long I remained in that vision. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the floor of our worship hall, surrounded by concerned disciples. A doctor was checking my pulse, mentioning something about dehydration and exhaustion. But I was transformed. The days that followed were tumultuous. How could I, Swami Arjuna, devoted Hindu monk and spiritual guide, reconcile what I had experienced? Was it merely a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and the intensity of our spiritual practices? Yet the encounter had been more real than anything I had experienced in all my years of meditation. The peace that flooded my being was not the temporary calm of a successful meditation session, but something permanent and unshakable. I began to secretly read the Bible one of our American visitors had left behind. The words of Jesus resonated with an authority that made the philosophical complexities of the Vedas seem like elaborate detours around a simple truth. "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." These words from John's Gospel haunted me. They were either the height of arrogance or the most important truth ever spoken. For weeks, I maintained my routine at the ashram while internally wrestling with this radical reorientation. I would lead morning meditation while contemplating Jesus' words about being born again. I would teach about karma while my heart dwelled on grace. The breaking point came during a private ritual I was performing for a wealthy donor. As I recited Sanskrit mantras invoking various deities, I felt a profound sense of violation, as if I were betraying the one who had revealed himself to me as the true God. I stopped mid-chant, causing the donor to open his eyes in confusion. "I cannot continue," I said simply, removing my mala beads from around my neck. "What's wrong, Swamiji?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Everything," I replied. "And nothing. I have found what I've been seeking all these years, but it is not what I expected to find." The news of my conversion spread through our ashram like wildfire. My most devoted disciples came to me in tears, some pleading, others accusing. "You have been deceived by Western ideas," one said bitterly. "How can you abandon the eternal Dharma for a foreign god?" asked another. The hardest conversation was with Prabhu, my assistant of 7 years who had followed me from India. He sat across from me in my quarters, his eyes red from weeping. "Guruji," he said, using the honorific despite my protestations, "I have given my life to follow your teachings. What am I to do now?" My heart broke for him and for all those who had trusted me as their spiritual guide. "Prabhu, I can only tell you what I have experienced. For years I have sought peace through ritual and self-discipline, only to find that peace in a person, in Jesus Christ." "But what about all you taught us about the many paths to God?" he challenged. I sighed, remembering how confidently I had proclaimed that very philosophy. "I taught what I believed. Now I understand that there is one path, one truth, one life. Jesus is not a way to God, he is God coming to us." Prabhu left my quarters that day and never spoke to me again. Within weeks, most of my disciples had abandoned the ashram. Some returned to traditional Hindu practices under different leadership. Others, disillusioned, abandoned spiritual seeking altogether. A few, very few, asked me to tell them more about Jesus. I surrendered my title, my robes, and my position. The ashram property, legally registered under a board of trustees, continued under new leadership, while I moved to a small apartment in downtown Bloomington. My new life began with simplicity bordering on poverty. After decades of being revered as a spiritual leader, I found myself anonymous, often overlooked. The humility of Christ became my daily teacher. I was baptized in a small church by a pastor who listened to my story with both amazement and gentle wisdom. "Arjun," he said, using my birth name, "God has been pursuing you your entire life, even when you were seeking him through different names and forms." Gradually, I began to share my testimony with others. Not with the authority of a Swami, but with the wonder of someone still discovering the dimensions of grace. Some former disciples cautiously reconnected, curious about the transformation they had witnessed in me. One evening, I received a call from Lakshmi, a longtime devotee who had been particularly devastated by my conversion. "I still don't understand how you could abandon everything," she said. "But I see a peace in you that is different from before. It's not the serene detachment of a Swami, but something alive." "That's exactly it," I replied. "I haven't found a philosophy or a system. I've found a living Savior who knows me by name. Today, I still rise before dawn, some habits remain, but instead of seeking moksha through meditation, I seek the face of Jesus in prayer and scripture. The God who once seemed distant and impersonal now walks beside me as friend and Lord. My greatest joy comes in introducing other seekers, particularly those from Hindu backgrounds, to the Christ who fulfilled what my soul had been searching for all along. My greatest sorrow is knowing that many who followed me as Swami Arjuna continue to seek liberation through paths that cannot deliver it. I often think of Jesus' words, "What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul?" I had gained respect, spiritual authority, and the admiration of many, yet my soul remained restless until it found rest in him. My journey continues, no longer as Swami Arjuna seeking moksha, but as Arjun Sharma, follower of Jesus Christ, walking in the freedom of being known and loved by the true and living God.